Have you ever felt that there is more to life than what you can see? In this video, you will journey with me through the timeless wisdom of Buddhism, from the life of the awakened one, to the path that releases suffering, to simple ways you can bring deep peace into your busy daily life. Each chapter reveals a part of the path to inner freedom. By the end, you will see how silence, awareness, and compassion can gently transform your world and help you awaken. The hidden power of silence. Silence is not just the lack of words. It is a presence on its own, a quiet space where the mind can rest and the heart can open. In today's world, filled with constant noise and endless notifications, silence often feels uncomfortable to many. Yet in Buddhism, silence is viewed as a source of strength, not weakness. When we choose silence, we create space to observe. We start to notice the thoughts moving through our mind, the emotions that arise and pass away, and the subtle energy within us. This awareness becomes the first step toward true wisdom. When we are always talking and always explaining, we leave no space to listen. Real listening starts with silence. Even the Buddha often taught by being silent. There were times when people asked questions, and instead of answering with words, he stayed quiet. That silence held more meaning than any long reply. It showed that some truths are beyond words and can only be felt in calm, inner reflection. Silence also helps us protect our energy. Words are strong. They can heal, but they can also hurt. Each time we speak, we give away a small part of ourselves. When we talk without awareness, we spread our energy too thin, and it becomes harder to stay balanced. But when we choose silence with care, we save that energy, and it slowly grows inside us like a hidden flame. Think about a tree. A tree does not announce its growth every day. It stands quietly, yet inside life is moving, roots growing deeper, branches reaching upward. Silence works in the same way within us. Growth does not always need words. Sometimes the deepest changes happen quietly, unseen by others, but very real inside. This quiet power of silence is not about shutting yourself away from the world. It is about knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. It is about knowing that not everything needs to be shared. Some experiences are too sacred, too delicate to be put into words. By keeping them in silence, we honor them. We let them shape us from within. Buddhist monks often spend long periods in silence, not as punishment, but as liberation. They discover that silence clears the mind, sharpens awareness, and deepens compassion. When you do not rush to fill every moment with words, you begin to hear life itself, the sound of your breath, the rustling of leaves, the beating of your heart. These are reminders that existence is alive in every moment, and silence is the key that opens the door to experiencing it fully. To embrace silence is to embrace strength. It is to understand that you do not need to explain yourself to everyone, that your peace does not depend on others' opinions. Silence teaches self-control, patience, and confidence. It shows that power is not in the loudest voice, but in the one who knows when to remain quiet. Why we talk too much, the roots of restlessness. Have you ever noticed how often people speak just to fill the silence? It is as if quietness feels like a threat. Many of us start talking not because we have something meaningful to say, but because we are uncomfortable with stillness. Buddhism helps us see that behind this constant need to talk lies restlessness, a mind that does not know how to settle. The Buddha described the human mind as being like a restless monkey, always jumping from one branch to another. Our thoughts leap from the past to the future, rarely staying in the present moment. When the mind is restless, words become a way to release the tension. We speak to distract ourselves, to avoid facing what is inside us. This is why so many conversations feel empty. They are not born from presence, but from unease. Another root of constant talking is fear. We fear being misunderstood, ignored, or unseen. By talking too much, we try to control how others see us. We reveal details of our life, our plans, our struggles, as if by sharing them we could prove our worth. But instead of creating connection, this often weakens us. The more we expose, the more we depend on others' reactions. Silence, on the other hand, teaches independence. It allows us to be whole without needing constant approval. Ego also plays a powerful role. Words can become a tool to display knowledge, to appear important, to prove that we exist. But Buddhism reminds us that the self we defend so strongly is not as solid as we think. When we are attached to our ego, silence feels threatening. Because in silence there is no stage, no audience, no performance. To embrace silence is to loosen the grip of ego, to discover that we are more than the stories we tell. There is also habit. In modern society, talking is encouraged from childhood. We are taught to share our thoughts, express our feelings, explain our decisions. While communication is valuable, it can turn into constant chatter if we are not mindful. We learn to speak more than we learn to listen. And without balance, speech becomes noise. From a Buddhist perspective, this endless talking feeds suffering. When the mind cannot rest, when it always seeks escape through words, it never touches the depth of peace. True happiness does not need to be announced or explained. It is felt in the quiet confidence of knowing who you are without having to declare it. This is why silence is so powerful. It breaks the cycle of restlessness. It teaches us to face ourselves without distraction. It allows us to see that our worth is not in the stories we tell, but in the awareness that watches them rise and fall. When you begin to reduce unnecessary speech, you may notice something surprising. Your presence becomes stronger. People listen more carefully when you speak less. Your words gain weight because they are no longer scattered. They are chosen with care. The roots of talking too much are restlessness, fear, ego, and habit. By seeing them clearly, we can begin to transform them. We can practice pausing before we speak, asking ourselves, is this necessary? Is this kind? Will silence serve better in this moment? In this way, silence becomes not a lack of expression, but the highest form of wisdom. Buddhist teachings on right speech and silence. In Buddhism, speech is never taken lightly. The words we choose carry consequences, not only for others, but also for ourselves. This is why the Buddha included right speech as one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path, the guide to end suffering. To practice right speech is to use our words with wisdom and compassion, but it also means understanding the value of silence. Right speech is described in 4 simple guidelines. Do not lie, do not use harsh words, do not gossip, and do not engage in idle chatter. At first, these may sound like rules meant only to keep society peaceful, but their depth goes much further. They point to the way words shape our mind. Every time we lie, we plant seeds of confusion in our consciousness. Every time we speak harshly, we nourish anger inside us. Gossip and idle chatter keep the mind restless and distracted. But the teaching does not stop at avoiding harmful speech. It also encourages us to speak truthfully, kindly, and with purpose. Words, when chosen with care, can heal, encourage, and bring clarity. A single sentence can lift someone from despair, while careless talk can push someone deeper into suffering. The Buddha compared words to arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. And yet, even truthful and kind words are not always necessary. Silence itself can be an expression of right speech. Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is say nothing. Silence is not a failure to respond, but a conscious choice that carries great strength. When you remain silent in the face of anger, you do not feed the fire. When you stay silent instead of gossiping, you protect both yourself and others. When you choose silence over unnecessary chatter, you create space for clarity. In the monasteries, monks are trained to see silence as a teacher. By speaking less, they learn to listen more deeply, not only to others, but to the subtler truths of life. They discover that many questions dissolve on their own when given the quiet space of reflection. In this way, silence is not emptiness. It is fertile ground for understanding. One of the Buddha's most powerful demonstrations of teaching through silence is found in a story often called the Flower Sermon. Instead of giving a long discourse, the Buddha simply held up a flower. Most of the audience waited for words, but one disciple, Mahakasyapa, simply smiled. In that moment, he understood. Truth cannot always be explained. Sometimes it can only be experienced in silence. This story shows that silence can transmit wisdom where words fail. It is a reminder that not every thought needs expression, not every experience needs explanation. In fact, speaking too much about deep insights can weaken them. Some truths must be lived in the quiet corners of the heart. Right speech, therefore, is not only about how we speak, but also about when we choose silence. It is about knowing the right moment, the right words, and the right intention. Practicing this awareness transforms our relationships. People feel safer with us because they know we do not waste words, we do not use speech carelessly. Our silence becomes a shield, and our words, when spoken, become treasures. Through this teaching, Buddhism invites us to look at silence not as an absence, but as part of the path itself. Right speech and silence are not opposites, they are partners. Together, they guide us toward a life of clarity, compassion, and peace. The dangers of revealing too much. There is a subtle trap hidden in our daily conversations, the need to reveal more than is necessary. We talk about our plans before they are real. We share our struggles before we have resolved them. We expose our private life as if it were meant for public display. On the surface it feels harmless, but Buddhism teaches us to look deeper. Every word we release carries energy, and revealing too much can quietly drain our strength. When we tell others about our intentions before acting, we sometimes weaken our resolve. Instead of focusing our energy inward, we spread it outward through words. Our goals become dependent on how others react. Their approval, their doubts, their judgments. If they encourage us, we may feel motivated, but if they criticize us, we lose confidence. By speaking too soon, we give away the power that should be fueling our action. Revealing personal struggles can also bring unexpected harm. Of course, sharing with a trusted friend or teacher can bring healing. But when we expose our pain carelessly, we risk misunderstanding. Others may not know how to hold our vulnerability, and their words, even unintentional ones, can deepen our wounds. Silence in these moments is not repression, but protection. It gives us the space to process before seeking the right support. Buddhism places great emphasis on guarding the mind. Just as we lock the doors of our house, we must also protect our inner world. Speaking without awareness is like leaving the doors open for anyone to enter. Not everyone who listens wishes us well. Some may use our words against us, others may distort them, and many simply will not understand. By being silent about certain aspects of our life, we preserve our peace and protect the sanctity of our inner journey. There is also the danger of gossip turning back upon us. When we speak too freely about others or reveal secrets that are not ours, we create a cycle of mistrust. In Buddhism, this is seen as planting negative seeds that eventually ripen into suffering. If we expose too much, we not only weaken ourselves, but also risk harming those around us. On a deeper level, revealing too much prevents true intimacy with ourselves. We become so busy narrating our life to others that we forget to live it. Experiences lose their depth when they are constantly translated into words. Silence allows us to savor them fully. A moment of joy, for instance, grows richer when we keep it in the heart, unspoken, like a hidden jewel. The Buddha advised restraint in speech, not because words are bad, but because they are powerful. Every unnecessary revelation scatters energy, while silence gathers it. To remain silent about certain parts of our life is not secrecy, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that not everything needs to be shared, that some truths are more alive when kept within. In our modern culture, where oversharing has become common, this teaching is more relevant than ever. Social media encourages constant exposure of our meals, our travels, our emotions, our private lives, but each time we reveal, we give a piece of ourselves away. The strength of silence lies in keeping some parts of our life sacred, untouched by the noise of opinions. By practicing silence in this way, we learn to stand strong within ourselves. We discover that our worth is not in how much we reveal, but in how deeply we live. The less we expose, the more we preserve our power. Silence becomes a form of dignity, a shield that protects our inner freedom. Protecting your energy and inner peace energy is one of the most precious resources we have. It is the force behind every thought, word, and action. Yet most people give it away unconsciously every day. We spend it through constant talking, explaining ourselves, and engaging in conflicts that do not serve us. Buddhism reminds us that protecting our energy is essential for inner peace, and silence is one of the most powerful ways to do so. When we speak without awareness, we leak energy. Every story we tell, every argument we enter, every unnecessary detail we share is like pouring water from a jar. Soon the jar is empty, and we feel drained without knowing why. But when we learn to hold back, to stay silent when silence is wiser, we preserve that energy. It gathers inside us, giving us strength, clarity, and stability. Inner peace cannot survive in a restless mind. If we are constantly caught in chatter, whether external or internal, our energy becomes scattered. We feel tired, anxious, and disconnected. Protecting our peace means learning to step away from the noise, both outside and within. This does not mean rejecting others, but rather choosing carefully how and when we engage. Silence is the filter that allows only what is necessary to pass through. The Buddha often spoke about guarding the senses. Just as a wise person protects their home, we are asked to protect the gates of our mind. Words are one of those gates. When we allow too many careless words to flow out, we leave ourselves vulnerable. But when we choose silence, we strengthen our boundaries. We decide what deserves our attention and what does not. Think of it like tending to a flame. If we expose the flame to too much wind, it will flicker and die. But if we protect it carefully, it will grow strong, steady, and bright. Our energy is the same. When we expose it through endless talk and explanations, it weakens. When we guard it with silence, it becomes a steady fire that nourishes our peace. Protecting our energy also means being mindful of the conversations we enter. Not every discussion is worth our time, and not every opinion deserves a response. Buddhism teaches us to act with wisdom, to recognize when speech is necessary, and when silence will serve better. In this way, silence becomes a form of self-respect. We no longer waste our energy on arguments or distractions that steal our peace. At the same time, silence allows us to cultivate compassion. By protecting our own energy, we are better able to care for others without resentment or fatigue. Inner peace is not selfish. It is the foundation from which true kindness grows. A mind that is drained cannot give, but a mind that is rested and silent can share love freely. In our busy modern lives, protecting energy has never been more important. Information is constant, conversations are endless, and the pressure to share is heavy. But you always have the power to choose silence. Each time you remain quiet instead of reacting, you save energy. Each time you keep a part of your life private, you protect your peace. Silence teaches us that our energy is sacred. It is the foundation of our well-being, our clarity, and our strength. When we protect it, we create a life rooted in calm and balance. And in that stillness, we discover that true peace is not something we chase. It is something we cultivate moment by moment in the quiet strength of silence. Silence has a tool for wisdom and self-mastery. Silence is more than the absence of sound. It is a discipline, a practice, and a path to mastery over the self. In Buddhism, silence is not about withdrawal from life, but about engaging with it more deeply. It sharpens perception, cultivates patience, and reveals wisdom that constant chatter hides. When we remain silent, we begin to notice the patterns of our own mind. Thoughts rise like waves, some calm, some stormy. Without silence, these thoughts often spill out through words before we even understand them. But in silence, we see them clearly. We learn that not every thought deserves to become speech. This awareness is the beginning of self-mastery. Silence teaches us control. Many conflicts in life are born not from action, but from reaction. A careless word spoken in anger can destroy trust in seconds. But silence offers a pause, a space to choose. In that pause, wisdom can enter. Instead of reacting blindly, we respond with clarity, or we decide not to respond at all. This is true strength, the ability to master ourselves instead of being mastered by impulses. Wisdom also grows in silence because silence helps us listen. Most people listen only so they can reply. Their minds are already forming an answer before the other person finishes speaking. But when you practice silence, you learn to listen calmly, without rushing, without judging, and without needing to add your own words. In this deep listening, truths appear that words alone cannot explain. Great Buddhist teachers often remind students that wisdom cannot be placed into the mind through talks alone. It has to be found within, and silence opens the door to that discovery. Meditation, for example, is simply guided silence. It is sitting quietly, noticing the breath, watching the mind, and letting deeper understanding arise. Without silence, meditation could not exist, and without meditation, wisdom would stay hidden. Self-mastery also means being free from the ego's constant need to be noticed and heard. The ego feeds on attention, and speaking is one of its favorite ways to get it. We talk to prove ourselves, to show what we know, and to feel important. But in silence, the ego has no stage. This may feel uneasy at first, but with time it becomes freeing. You begin to see that your value is not measured by how much you speak, but by how deeply you exist. Practicing silence is not simple. At the beginning, the mind resists. It wants to fill the space with noise, explanations, stories, and excuses. But like any discipline, steady practice brings change. The more you practice silence, the more you start to notice its effects: calmer emotions, clearer thoughts, and a stronger presence. People begin to sense a quiet strength in you, not because of what you say, but because of the calm you carry. In Buddhism, mastering the self is seen as the greatest victory. Gaining control over the world means little if you cannot guide your own mind. Silence is one of the most powerful tools for this win. It teaches control, focus, and awareness. It changes a restless mind into a steady flame. It lets wisdom rise naturally, like water becoming clear after the mud settles. To choose silence as a tool is to pick growth over ease, wisdom over noise, and control over impulse. It is to walk a path where every word is chosen, every pause is respected, and every moment of silence becomes a guide. In this way, silence is not empty, but full of strength, clarity, and freedom. Stories and lessons from Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks have long shown that silence teaches more than words ever could. Their lives are clear examples of how quiet living builds wisdom and compassion. One story tells of a young monk who asked his teacher endless questions about enlightenment. The teacher never replied. He simply remained silent. At first, the monk became upset, but with time he realized that the silence itself was the answer. When the noise in his mind quieted, understanding came on its own. Another well-known teaching comes from the practice of noble silence. During retreats, monks stay completely silent for many days. At first it feels very difficult, but as the mind calms, peace begins to appear. In that quiet, they start to hear life itself, the rhythm of the breath, the sound of the wind, the pulse of existence. A third story tells of a monk who was insulted by a passerby. He stayed peaceful and said nothing. Later he explained, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, who does it belong to?" His silence was not weakness, it was wisdom, the strength of not feeding conflict. Through these stories, we learn that silence is not emptiness, but awareness. It guards what is sacred, deepens understanding, and grows compassion. The monks remind us that silence is a teacher that speaks without words. And if we truly listen, it can change us deeply, bringing the power of silence into daily life. Silence is not only for temples or mountains, it is a strength we can bring into everyday life, in how we speak, listen, and act. The real challenge is not escaping noise, but staying calm within it. Start small, pause and take a breath before you speak. In that brief pause, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say needed? Is it kind? Those few moments of silence can change everything. Talks become gentler, conflicts soften, and your words carry more meaning. Invite silence into your day. Spend a few minutes without your phone, take a walk without music, or sit quietly before sleep. In that space, the mind calms, energy comes back, and the heart opens. Silence slowly stops feeling empty and begins to feel alive. In relationships, silence shows respect. Listening without cutting in can heal more than advice ever will. At work, silence brings clarity. It sharpens focus and strengthens presence. In your private life, silence is dignity, a way to protect what is sacred. So don't see silence as distance. See it as strength, wisdom, and love. You don't need to share everything, explain everything, or speak just to be heard. True peace does not shout, it whispers, and if this message touched you, share it. Let's spread the power of silence in a world that never stops talking, because sometimes the strongest voice is the one that chooses to stay quiet.